G'day everybody, how you going today? It is so very good to see you, even if it's in my mind's eye. So this video is about my favorite images ever. It spans 5 decades, 5 different brands of cameras, but it happens to be 6 images because I just couldn't quite narrow 2 of them down. Let's dive into it. I'd love you to tell me what you like and what you don't like and what works for you, and also what is some of your favorite images. All right, let's do it. Let's start with the 1980s. And this is the first image right here, known as St. Kilda Fog. Now, one thing I wanted to say, I'm live switching this through the Blackmagic ATM Mini, and it does seem to affect the colors a little bit, so they're not quite as accurate as I'd like them to be. Now, this image was taken in 1989, the winter of 1989, which is the middle of 1989. It was photographed on the Pentax P30, and I think it was probably shot on Ilford FP4, but it may well have also been shot on HP5. Now, this was before I was making money out of photography, so I was just doing it because I got so excited by it. I still didn't have a car at this point. I was riding my bicycle, and I could see that it was a foggy winter day, and I loaded my camera into my bag on my back, and I headed off down towards the beach. Now, because this was not my profession, there was only 5 or 6 shots left in the camera. That was it. That's all I had. That was the only roll of film I had. I was still a student, and I had to make it count. And I made a video about it here that you should watch, about one of the most important things that you should ever do is shoot on film to improve and sharpen your photographic skills. This was one of 4 or 5 images that came out of this shoot as I traveled along the beach taking these glorious images in the fog. Now, what do I love about it? Well, certainly there's a degree of nostalgia for me, but I love the fact that fog gives this sense of depth. So if we look here, we can see things in the foreground are nice and contrasty, and they are black and white. And then as you get further from the camera and the fog, the density, the particles in the air increase. Things that really should be black and white, they just fade away to nothing. So what fog and atmosphere and rain and other elements do is they give you this great sense of depth. And clearly photography is a flat medium. So for me, any opportunity, whether you're doing it through atmospheric particles or whether you might be using bokeh, these things help to create depth, which for me is pretty critical in photography because I want to make it feel dimensional and alive and like you're there, which is why I shoot with wide apertures as often as possible. I love that sense of depth. So this image means a lot to me. 1989, shot on film, shot on the Pentaxes, and yeah, it's just a lovely representation of both St. Kilda, the suburb where I was, in winter in the fog, and I just love the story and the drama that comes out of it. Let's move to the 1990s. This image, known as Light Consideration. That's its title. Perhaps I was thinking in the title about the consideration of light. Now again, you can see some similarities between the previous shot. The foreground is high in contrast, and then the background is disappearing into the fog. And again, I love that sense of depth. But you can also see here in this image that I was very happy to have lens flare. Now, as I was growing up in the 80s and starting to get interested in photography, people always suggested to me, that's a bad idea, having lens flare, having shooting into the sun. Don't shoot into the sun. That's just not good quality photography. Well, I love the look, I love the vibe. And if you look at this video here about the dirty frame, not only can the dirty frame be dirty because of elements like this, but it can also be dirty from light flares and so on and so forth. So I was always a big fan of that sort of stuff. Interestingly, with this image, I decided to do, because there was more lens flare in the camera than you see in this image, but if you look up here at the top of the frame, this is my hand. So what I was doing was cutting out part of the lens flare and leaving part of the lens flare. Now, what's really super interesting about this image is I released this as a poster in 1997. This was shot in 1994. 2,000 posters were made at that time, and they sold out. And I never removed my hand from the image. My hand continues to be in every single copy of this image. So this really just comes back to me, the fact that the drama and the meaning and the emotion and the power of an image can absolutely outstrip anything else that's going on. For example, what is that strange object in the top of frame? No one's ever asked. No one's ever had a problem with it. And as I said, not only did I sell 2,000 posters, but I sold countless original prints. Again, beautiful textures, great sense of depth as we cross the Yarra River here over to Flinders Street Station. I just love this image for all of the different things that are going on here. Clearly wintry Melbourne with the leaves off the trees. So let's move on. This image was taken in 2006 on a Canon S80. Now the Canon S80, off the top of my head, was either a 6 or an 8 megapixel camera. And the reason I had this camera was because I wanted to have a competent manual camera with me at all times. Obviously that was not possible with a DSLR. This thing was a small, tiny little sensor, but it was about the size of a Sony RX100 today, slightly chunkier. I could fit it in my pocket. And this was late one night. It was like 11:30 at night, and I was ready to leave a bar. I'd had enough, and it was raining, and I went out, and this scene fell before me. Now, what's really interesting about this particular scene is that I didn't have a tripod, and the only way to capture it was with a long exposure. So the camera is actually sitting on a rubbish bin, a trash can. We call them rubbish bins here in Australia. So I had one hand over the lens like this to stop the rain falling on the lens and on the camera because it wasn't weather sealed. And then I had another hand underneath. Just making sure that if the camera slipped off, because the bin was stainless steel and it was very slippery, I could catch it before it hit the ground. I set the self timer, I preset the half-second timer and whatever else, and this was the image. And I was so lucky that the taxi, this is a taxi cab here, just went by as I took the shot. And I only took about 3 or 4 versions of this shot, and that was it. And what do I love about it? Well, I love the wet street and the glowing lights, the fact that you get basically color, double the color here, you get double the color, you get double everything. Beautiful rainbow and palette of colors going on here, and this is just a really kind of classic Melbourne sort of moment that does remind me a little bit of that famous James Dean image when he's walking through New York, perhaps down Broadway or somewhere like that. I just love this shot, and it was very evocative of my hometown, Melbourne, with our famous cafe culture and our love of books and so on. So, yes, this is Pulp Fiction. And I followed through so much on my love of Pulp Fiction, so much so that I made it the cover of my very first book. If you really want one of these, you can get it off my website. I've almost completely sold out of this big book. Another book next year, for sure, when the pandemic's over. Okay, let's move on to the roaring 2010s. And here we have an image that I love oh so much. This is called Green and Gold. Now, what's really interesting about this camera, as I've talked in previous videos, I was super excited about the idea of compact and then mirrorless 35mm cameras. The year before this image was taken, or the year before, I bought the Nikon mirrorless, but the problem with that is the sensor was literally minuscule, and it didn't work for me. The following year, late 2013, the Sony A7R came out, and I bought it straight away. I loved the fact that I could adapt my Nikon glass. Even so it only worked manually, it didn't matter to me. And this image here is part of the fruit of that marriage between Sony and Nikon. So exciting. So what we're looking at here is the Sony A7R, 36 megapixels with the Nikon 24mm tilt shift lens on the front. Love this combo, love the results, just so good. And what we have going on here with the tilt shift is we can control what's in focus in a plane, and what I chose here was this plane in the middle. All of this area is in focus, and then you can make other areas of the frame out of focus. So it's a type of bokeh. I'm not sure if it's called bokeh or if it's not aperture related. It is aperture related in a way, but the focus areas are exaggerated. The out of focus areas are exaggerated by the fact that you're literally shifting the plane of what's falling on the sensor. We will do a tilt shift video another day, but needless to say, putting this lens on the camera and using this way, they're actually designed for correcting distortion in buildings and so on, but I love walking around and using them this way, because what it can do is it can allow you to get rid of some distractions that if they were in sharp focus, they would be distracting. But if you pull them out of focus, they're not distracting, but they're still there, thus allowing you the frame that you want without having to deal with things that maybe might not be quite so pleasant for you. So there's so much I love about this. I love the sun streaming in. I love the blown out highlights that says it's a beautiful warm morning. It's lovely. And then we've still got our shadow areas. So we've got shade, we've got highlights, we've got the color. The color rendition is fantastic. And it's just, it really, to me, this image, and this is what I try to do with my photography, it actually evokes the moment. I genuinely feel like I can sit down there, grab a hot chocolate, grab a ham cheese croissant, and off we go. And I do. I want to sit there. It looks like a warm, friendly place to be, and that's exactly how it felt for me. And again, I love this image so much, it became the cover of another book. This is the smaller version of the book that you just saw before. Love this image, and it's super evocative of Melbourne. And to reiterate, photographed on the Sony A7R completely manually, and I really just really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed the process of working with the Sony A7R. I had only owned that camera maybe 3 months when I took this image, and yeah, very happy. Let's move to the next one. We're still in the roaring 2010s. And here we have one of my most sublime images that I just it almost brings me to tears, this image, because I love it so much. And here it is. This is Love Junk, photographed on the gorgeous Hasselblad H4D 60 megapixel medium, true medium format. I think it's roughly double the size of 35mm. It might even be more. And you know what this camera is amazing at is color and texture. It just captures it so very well. Now, if we zoom in here, and I don't know when we're at 100%, but let's say that that's pretty close to 100%. If we zoom in here, we can see just these, and this is a JPEG, by the way. This is not the full-size file. We can just see how beautifully rendered these textures are, and this is the sort of place that you want textures and color, because it's full of textures and it's full of color. Like, I just love. Check out here. The reason it's called Love Junk is because there's a couple. Look, there they are hiding there. They're kissing. And this here is a garbage truck, or a dump truck, as it's known in certain parts of the world, just leaving. And there is so much that I love about this image. I love the perspective, I love the texture, I love the wet street. Now, something that's interesting about a Hasselblad is really, they're not really designed to be, you know, out in the rain. Shouldn't be out in the rain. But it's like, I've purchased this tool, and this tool is for creating beautiful images, and this is where these beautiful images are going to be found. So I'm just going to use this tool. That's what I'm going to do. So the rain was just pitter-pattering very lightly, and out I went. This is a 15mm lens equivalent. It's actually a 24mm lens, but it's 15mm equivalent on this particular camera. So you've got this beautiful wide view. It handles distortion really well. I think we were running at 5.6 f-stop, so it's not a massive depth of field, but because it's so wide and it's just so gorgeous and luscious, here it is. So I love this image for color, texture, perspective, and life and movement. Really, this image has got all the elements for me. And the Hasselblad files are so rich, this image has not been adjusted hardly at all to give it this degree of richness. This is just how good it is. Let me know if you'd like to see some more images coming out of the Hasselblad. It's a gorgeous thing. Now, This camera, new, is something like $50,000. I didn't buy it new. I simply couldn't afford a camera like that. Nor would I, even if I could make it happen. I don't think I would spend that much money. There's a really interesting story as to how I got this camera. So a few years back, I was invited by the Supreme Court justices to go to their annual conference and to present them with some sort of halftime entertainment, because the subjects they were talking about were so serious, they just needed to have a break and listen to somebody else talking about something they were passionate about. I'm passionate about photography, and I'm passionate about my city. So these justices of Australia listened to me talk for 90 minutes about photography and about my city. And then at the end, one of the justices came up to me and he said, "Oh, you know, I've got this Hasselblad and I don't really use it. And I don't know what to do." And I made a joke. I said, "Well, why don't we swap my D810 for your Hasselblad?" I knew it wasn't a fair swap, and he nodded. And then after a few weeks, I got this email from him where he outlined that with the D810, some cash and some tuition, we could have a deal. So I got this beautiful Hasselblad with 2 lenses for a great deal from my perspective, and this is how I ended up being able to create an image like this, which I just adore. Now, to follow through on how much I adore it, again, this ended up on the cover of the mini book. So just, you might think I'm using the same book twice. I'm not. When I make my books, I do this thing where I make multiple jackets, because my thinking behind the multiple jackets is people can buy the jacket that they love. I mean, it makes sense that some of my favorite images of all time are the ones that I put on books, because I love them. And if you're after any of these books, you can jump on the website and you can just go to products and you can see there's the books there, that's that book there, and then there's that book there. Everything's in Australian dollars, etc. And we send globally, if you're wondering. Let's move to the final image, and here it is. Boom. One photographed this year on the Nikon Z6 with a beautiful vintage 50mm 1.2 lens. So I had the great pleasure of someone who was part of our focus group experiment lending me one of their beautiful old lenses, which was this from the 1970s 50mm 1.2. So I thought, yes, well, I've got to take it out. So I took it out and popped it on the Z7 and the Z6. This particular image here was taken with the Z6. So you can walk around under street lights and get astonishing images like this with a lens like this, which is why I'm so excited for the new 50mm 1.2. I'm pumped about that. Anyway, to come back to this image, which I'll just throw in here, may as well get it in early this time to mess it up. Yes, I love this image so much as well. I made it the cover of the calendar. So if you want to get a calendar, you can also jump on the website. I love these images. I publish these images. That's what I do. So what do I love about this image? Well, it's the color. I love the fact there's this golden light, beautiful. And I love the glowing ground. Obviously, but it had a little bit of rain, fabulous. I love the bikes, and that texture of the bikes is there, which is great. And I love the background, the out of focus background bokeh, sorry. Tell me if that's right, bokeh, the out of focus background. It's just a lovely image. It's got great balance, it's got great warmth, and it feels like a place that I want to go. And then we have the nostalgia of the old cinema. The Capitol Theatre, which is a cinema. This just ticks all the boxes for me, and it tells a story. It has some drama. I want to go there. I want to feel it. I can feel the moment, and that's just a big part of my photography for me is feeling the moment. And this was shot handheld, by the way. The only image, there's only 2 images in this lot of 6 that are not handheld, and that was the Hasselblad image, which was 8 or 16 seconds, and the Pulp Fiction image, which was half a second. As always, everybody, it is so good to see you. Thank you very much for being here. I'd love your thoughts and feedback on these images. Please let me know in the comments below. If this is your first time here, how very lovely to meet you. I hope you're going well today. I'd love to see you again, so please subscribe. Now, of course, please share. That helps get the word out there. And please like, because it's great for the videos. And if you'd like to watch over 250 videos right now, you can just click down there and see a whole lot more. All right, everybody. I'll see you very soon, and look after yourselves. All right, take it easy. See ya.